a martial arts movie podcast.
I threw that shit before I walked in the room.
Featuring drunken Thai boxer, Will.
Too bad you will die.
The also drunken wrestler, Mark.
I said I don't want trouble.
And drunken karate master, Zero.
You've lost your balls.
And now,
Talk. I know Kung Fu. You know, baby.
Fists of Fail.
We are talking about Ninja Shadow of a Tear. And I guess the alternative title is obviously Ninja 2, but I don't even think it's worth it to call it Ninja 2 because you really don't need to see the first movie.
Yeah, they
at all.
separate it very clearly. There are returning characters, Scott Adkins and Mika Hiji as Namiko. But after the first few moments of the movie, it clearly just goes in like a different direction. Not a different direction, but it becomes the Scott Adkins show.
Yeah, right, and that's perfectly fine. Although I've seen the first movie, and actually it's been a while since either of us watched it. The first movie's kind of forgettable, but like the story is very straightforward. It's a super straightforward film, whereas this movie is not at all. I think the story is very complicated in this film.
See, I would say the overall plot of this movie is extremely simple. They had to add layers of complexity, air quotes, because they just needed to have kind of a plot twist at the end. Right? I mean, yeah. I would say that's true. So basically, the plot of this movie is Scott Adkins is living with his wife, Namiko, in Japan.
Yep.
He is now the dojo master, the head teacher of the school from the first movie. And, we kind of have to spoil it because this happens like pretty early in the movie.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But his wife is murdered.
Yep.
And that sets Scott Adkins on a path for revenge. And that is like pretty much the overall plot of the movie.
Well, yeah, when you explain the first 10 minutes of the film, it sounds simple. and the story beats after that get like there's just a lot of distractions going on, and I kind of get lost sometimes because like unlike the first movie where it's really just like 2 locations, this movie has like 3. Technically, they shot in 2 locations, right? They shot in Japan and they shot in Thailand, and they masked certain parts of Thailand to look like Myanmar. But it's really 3 locations, and they jump back and forth between some of them. And then there's a lot of story beats that just keep on happening. That like you're constantly thinking, like, where are we going next? Where is this Casey character going to be in the next scene? And it's a little bit too frenetic for me. But not in a bad way. It's just a far departure from the first movie, which is so simple. It's like, they just have to stop the villain, or survive, killed at the end. But again,
they didn't need to complicate it as much as they did. But I was fine with that. I didn't think it was too bad.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Because that's not to detract from what this movie actually is. It's an action film. And you're here for the action. That's what we do. That's what we break down the fight scenes.
Hey, there you go.
There's our stinger,
right?
our organic intro to what we do. So the fortunate yet unfortunate thing about this movie is that there's a lot of fight scenes. Great fight scenes, of course, but it'd be probably impossible for us to talk about all of them unless you really feel like sitting through like another Lord of the Rings-esque movie length of a discussion. So what we'll do is we'll talk about the ones that probably are the more like the highlight ones, right? The ones that like really stand out.
The ones that feature probably more complicated choreography.
Yeah,
because there are many moments where, yes, there are fights. Usually if they're short, we refer to them as scuffles, where it's just maybe a few bouts of choreography, a few combinations being thrown, and then bad guys are dispatched. And if nothing really interesting is happening, I don't really want to go into detail about those.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, you summed up the plot pretty concisely before. I think that's all you really need to know. We do have some fights that like really don't pertain to the plot so much. But we'll still discuss them, right? So like in the first fight scene is kind of like our intro to Scott Adkins' fighting capabilities, right? It's really short. It's between him and two like muggers, I guess, right? They take his wallet. One of them is a character, is a performer that we actually covered in a previous episode from Raging Phoenix. His name is Patrick Tang. But all in all, this fight scene is like really short. It's like they obviously don't hold anywhere close to a candle to Scott Adkins. But like all in all, I don't really think there's too much to discuss here. Like I don't think there's like any big standouts.
I kind of like this fight. It's it's the movie just started. We're at the 5-minute point, so it's kind of pleasantly surprising that we get not a complicated fight, but there is some decent choreography. It's a lot of knife swings and Scott Adkins, dodging out of the way and, trying to just not get sliced. But there's one thing I wanted to point out, which I didn't pick up on when we first watched the movie. So, what's his name? Patrick Tang throws a really nice triple kick at Scott Adkins. And then I was asking you this while we were watching the film. When he goes to a dojo later, he's asking one of his students about a triple kick. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize he was trying to figure out the fighting style based off of this move that the guy throws.
Yeah.
I did not pick up on that at all, because when he goes to the dojo later, I kept on asking. I was like, why does he care about a triple kick? I was like, what? I was like, what was the point of that? And upon rewatching this, I noticed he throws a triple kick, and I was like, oh, like the light bulb over the head. I was like, oh, no one's gonna get that. No one's gonna pick up on that. Yeah. That's such a weird plot path to go through.
Right. Yeah, I thought about that too. I thought that it was really weird that we ended up in that dojo, a couple minutes later after this. And Scott Adkins? I guess this kind of makes sense, right? Because like I've heard that like once you like figure out a person's like martial arts or like their fighting style, like you can kind of almost like trace back to like where they might have learned it, and then you can go back to the dojo and well, I mean, obviously Scott Adkins can detect like, oh, well, you use this one technique, and I know that technique is connected to such and such dojo, so he goes there. But the movie doesn't really explain it all too well. Like they have like a throwaway line.
Explain it well at all.
I think they have a throwaway line.
It's one line of dialogue where he says, where did that triple kick come from, or something along those lines, and then he just goes to the dojo. I just thought that was a useless fight scene. Like him wanting revenge and just beating up people, so they decided to pad it with a fight scene. Right. But it kind of has relevance to the plot upon rewatching, so
kinda,
yeah. Doesn't really need to be there, but sure, he's looking for this guy who he believes may have murdered his wife.
Mm-hmm. Right, and well, I mean that comes up a little later, right? So like, yes. Right after this, like, what's the next fight scene? I mean, like again, there's really not much to talk about here. So like Scott Adkins loses his wife because she demands that they get a chocolate bar in the middle of the night. So that's why you don't leave your wife at home to go get candy.
Well, she was pregnant with this child, which is also pretty horrible.
But again, don't leave your pregnant wife for candy. that's the moral of the story here.
Sure.
I guess really, like, yeah, you're right. The next fight scene really is would be in the dojo. Wow, that's practically 15 minutes later. But yeah, like again, there's like a tally of like 11 fights in this movie. So 15 minutes is a long time. So yeah, like this fight scene, this is one to actually talk about because it's a one take. It is a one-shot, long-take fight scene that Isaac Florentine the director, was really like gung-ho on making. And like it's great because I definitely like the camera work here. It always feels like it's focused on the action. It's always focused on the action and like never feels like it's shaky cam, which I feel like it's very easy to like mess that up with the place like this, or like a setting like this.
And one of the nice things too is for certain movements, it goes into slow motion, and it feels appropriate and it feels right. It never feels gratuitous. Like for nice moves, when he does like a jumping sidekick to kick this poor white guy who's also in Japan by himself, it goes into slow motion. I'm just like, oh, okay, that it's pretty nice that they filmed this with the frame rate in mind, that they wanted to highlight certain movements.
Yeah, for sure. I actually noticed that too. Like when as soon as the dialogue's over, right? They definitely switched cameras, right? Because the capabilities of what they could do with the action camera, with slow mo and whatnot, those speed ramps. Like obviously we want something that's capable of recording that. But then as soon as we switch to action camera, like there's just I immediately noticed like it's like, well, we're gonna have an action scene. It's like
right.
Like
it
the
goes
lens
like
looks
really
wider.
wide.
Yeah. And like this again. I don't know if I've said this in the past before. This is how you do speed ramping. I think it's not like a Zack Snyder production where it's like it's like I feel like it's like gratuitous when he does it. Like with the slow mo speed ramp and slow mo. Here it's like it never feels like they speed up the action. Like the normal speed is as fast as it gets, but when they'll slow it down to highlight specific moves. Not like a Zack Snyder production where like they'll speed up certain moves to make it look more impactful. Here, Scott Adkins doesn't need that.
Right. He's going his normal speed, and what they do is they only slow down like highlighted moves. It never does like the speed up like Zack Snyder usually does in his films.
Yeah, I've never been a big fan of that. I always thought that was really like a cop out way of like making action look more intense than it actually is.
I think it works for some things that he does, but like I wouldn't want that here. And I think what ended up happening with Zack Snyder is he used it so often it became like almost a parody of his of his shooting style. Now I think if you wanted to make fun of Zack Snyder, you would just shoot a scene like that, slow to fast, slow to fast.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, like this is great because well, I mean, like I like the cinematography here too because like it's shot in like the midday, so you get this like really nice daylight effect, like that's like captured on the lens, right? You see these flares, and it's like natural glow. I don't know, it just makes the scene a little bit more stylized, even though the room itself is actually very sterile, right? There's nothing in the room. It's just these guys.
It's just a normal dojo,
These like very empty room. Yeah, and
I like the lens.
The one
flare
thing
too.
that adds. Oh man, we are delayed as hell.
I think we're out of sync, but sure, keep going.
Yeah, of course. Sure, no, yeah, but I think we're both on the same page about the whole lens flare thing. We are talking to one another remotely because of the world ending, but yeah, but like this fight has like this 2-minute sequence. Like what? It's not even 2 minute sequence. It's like maybe like 30 seconds long. It's really not that long, but like it is a one take, right? So like it is very impressive, and it ends with Scott Adkins delivering this like flip to, I don't even know, like what is it? Like it's a flip to an arm bar, I guess. Like it's a great way to like end the fight.
He like kind of latches onto the guy's left hand, and he backflips over the guy's shoulder and then kind of like pinning him down on the ground into like an arm lock. Really, really nice stuff. I don't know what that's called. I don't know the technical name, but it looks really nice. And the one thing I wanted to point out is the one white guy I mentioned before, who's this fighter. He gets like kicked to the ground 4 different times by Scott Adkins because they're using minimal stuntmen in the scene, and he keeps on kicking him away. And Scott Adkins will like take care of some other guys in the fight, and he'll keep on coming back onto the screen, which is, I mean, it's not like they're trying to hide it's a new guy, like it's him because he gets back up like in the background. But it's just funny that this poor guy has to go through all this stuff, and then at the end he gets like put in this arm submission. So I thought that was pretty funny.
I like how the Asian dude in the back, with the mullet-esque hair, like he, his first time around getting knocked down was through a bunch of punches and kicks to the face, and then he gets actually taken out in the fight with the judo throw. It's like how's that one more of a more impactful than the first set of moves? Yeah, but like again, like this is great mostly because it is a one take. Like I think that's the most impressive thing about it. It's the standout reason to watch this. It's not super impressive in terms of the choreography, but it doesn't need to be, right? Because like the impressiveness comes from the fact that it is one long shot.
And he's taking people out in very, small combinations, but they look powerful. So it feels, it feels earned that they're kind of, that he's like kicking them away so easily.
Right. Yeah. So this fight's over. And then what ends up happening is now Scott Adkins corners the two muggers that were, I guess they're associated with this dojo, right? He corners them in an alleyway and then let's just say he beats them up. Okay, I don't know if it's much of a spoiler. It really doesn't matter, but like he basically beats these guys up. One thing we should probably mention with this whole movie is that this is one of the first instances where Scott Adkins actually needed a stunt double for a lot of his performances because he had a back injury during an ACL injury around this time. So a lot of the stunts he could do, but he could do, but sometimes they require a stunt double, right? So they had I'm trying to remember his name. He is the second hand to Tim Mann, who is the stunt choreographer for this movie. I'm always gonna forget this guy's name. Schaub. Anyways, so this guy, he was the final, he was one of the sub bosses in the movie Boyka, the fourth undisputed film, and whenever there are certain scenes where you don't actually see Scott Adkins' face, like in this particular fight scene where you see Scott Adkins does in this dark alleyway, he does a corkscrew in midair. You don't see his face, right? And like that's actually like bizarre for a Scott Adkins film. So basically, anytime he does something crazy, as soon as he's done delivering it, you clearly tell that was him. So here he has a hood on. I'm guessing it's because of the fact that Scott Adkins actually couldn't do most of this stuff. Bram Schaub, there you go. That's what his name was. Anyways, that was a long tangent, and this is way too much to talk about for this one super short fight scene, where he just basically beats up these two guys. And now we're suddenly in Thailand, right?
Yeah, I guess maybe if we wanted to elaborate on the plot a little bit, Scott Adkins has a buddy, Kane Kosugi, who runs his own karate dojo in Thailand, and he offered Scott to come there, to kind of, take his mind off of the death of his wife. So now he's finally taken him up on that offer, and he's sparring for fun, quote unquote.
Well, there's a character named Lucas, right, who was played, I'm going to try to get his name right, Jawad El Berni. I actually thought that he was the one who's subbing in for Scott throughout all this, but it turns out that's clearly not true. This guy, even though he only has one fight scene in this whole film where he's sparring with Scott, I thought he was very impressive. He definitely has, the speed that, I was actually hoping for when it comes to, a good training partner for Scott Adkins. And of course these two are obviously just sparring, right? But it's really weird it's a really weird setup once halfway through Lucas takes out a bokken or a wooden sword and starts swinging it at Scott Adkins, who's unarmed. It's that's not fucking fair.
Yeah, that's a little odd. But I guess how else are they gonna raise the stakes?
Yeah.
I guess it would have been nice if he took out the sword, but then he threw Scott a sword as well, so it was equal. Because swinging at an unarmed man during a sparring match doesn't seem very nice. Right.
Yeah. Of course. Well, okay. Well, let's not completely breeze through the first half of this fight. Even though I'm the one responsible for that. So yeah, like I said before, Scott Adkins was technically injured for some of the for this film, so he needed a double. But I'm still impressed by what he can actually do. So I guess he just had off days where they're just okay, we need to have Schaub sub in for him. Here, he does this crazy tornado to axe kick in midair, right? Once he has Lucas on the ground, he sets up into a tornado stance, and then he just sends that leg flying down. You can clearly tell that's him. And it's not super impressive from a choreography standpoint, but you can see how super flexible and how much like Taekwondo background that Scott Adkins has. And like this guy, Lucas, like he definitely hits all his marks when it comes to like trading blows with, and again, this is supposed to be all sparring. So you can tell that they're trying their hardest, like not to go full out, if that makes any sense. Right, they're not really trying to hurt one another. It really does look like they're actually like not play fighting, but they're have some sort of like mutual respect.
Right. No one's going for killing blows or anything like that. It's there's kind of they're throwing punches and kicks that are kind of straight down the line towards center mass. So it's nothing that the other person can't block.
Right. Again, I guess it's obvious once Lucas starts swinging at Scott, like this is where again I think that Scott probably had to get his stunt double where he does a corkscrew, to avoid the most obvious way to avoid a wooden sword is by doing a jumping gainer and then twisting yourself 1.5 times, of course. But that's clearly a stunt double, because again you can't see Scott's face. And then when Scott disarms him, Lucas does an accidental smack in the face, or he punches Scott in the face. I thought that was a little weird because I kind of was on the side of Scott. Like Scott obviously loses his temper and starts like wailing on Lucas afterwards. But I'm like, yeah, that guy shouldn't have fucking done that. That's not that I condone him being violent, but I'm like, yeah, that's not fucking cool, man.
Right. Well, I mean, it's one of those things where in the heat of the moment, you defended, but you'd accidentally hurt the person, and that's what he does to Scott here. Mm-hmm. And he apologized, and Scott is in the throes of anger because his wife is dead, so he just kind of takes it out on this poor kid.
Right. Well, speaking of that, that's actually the driving force for most of the fights in the movie, or like basically the whole film, right? But that's the driving force for this next scene, because after Scott is so distraught that his wife is dead, he goes to a bar and just takes on a bunch of people, and in a drunken fit, I guess.
It kind of reminded me of Van Damme in Kickboxer, but 10 times more angrier, and no sexy dancing or no splits.
I was just gonna mention the dancing. That's what this needed. Hey, it's just like kickboxing. Well, was Kickboxer in Thailand? I guess it technically.
Well, it's supposed to be in Thailand, yeah.
Right. Oh, I guess that's another connection there. Well, I definitely prefer this fight because this is not nearly as obviously this is more modern, this is more stylized, and I guess they got the local Thai stunt team, local Thai stunt team to come in and do a lot of these performances. Basically all these dudes, all these roughnecks are just like cannon fodder for Scott, right? He's just there to like really beat them all up with relative ease. Scott's just basically using his environment, right, to his advantage. At first he's just delivering a bunch of kicks to like dispatch a lot of these dudes. But then later towards the fight, he starts flipping guys and smacking them against the side of the counter, which looks really painful because obviously they're landing inverted. And then later on he uses a table to flip over, and then he uses that to kind of clothesline a guy. But
so it's in this scene that I think he mentioned that he tweaked his back, and in that moment where he kind of goes over the table, I think that's where he said he felt he pulled something. And I think this scene is where you can see a lot of his stunt double was needed. So that's probably this is probably one of the earlier scenes that they filmed where he then his back problem arose, right. And that's why they needed the double to come in for the his more flashy, complicated kicks.
I like I was listening to Scott's show Art of Action, and he was saying that on his bad days he literally couldn't even lift his leg up to deliver a single kick. He was that out of commission. So it's amazing that they got him for this at all, to complete this fight scene. but obviously they used the double for whenever they needed to. I love how this, like, knowing that fact, knowing that we actually have a double, it almost feels like there's this one shot that actually feels like it compensates for all that. There's a shot where Scott, like, he does a bunch of punches and delivers a hook kick, and then you see that it's like behind the shoulder, and then Scott like turns his head and he looks directly at the camera, almost to indicate like, no, it's me. Okay, just make sure that you know it's me, not a double. But obviously, this is a double. There's this really cartoony like moment where Scott is, basically defending himself from a bunch of dudes, and all of a sudden, like, you see this knife rise out of the foreground, almost to indicate like, yes, there's a guy who's gonna be approaching him with a knife, but like it just feels a little cartoonish. It's like, yes, focus on this prop, audience.
Well, that's a very classic, cinematography type move. You put the weapon in the foreground just to telegraph, okay, this is what's now coming towards the protagonist.
Yeah.
So
good.
So I was gonna say one thing that I thought was kind of disappointing about one of the moves in this sequence is you get Scott Adkins' Guyver kick, which I think is probably being thrown by his stunt double. But it's one of those things where the move is so fast, it's hard to pick up what he's doing. And because the camera's so far away, it was a little hard to even tell that was a Guyver kick. I could only see that upon rewatching and then, slowing things down. I wish they shot a little closer and a little lower to the ground so we could just kind of see the leg sweep over and then the kick come out of nowhere and hit the guy in the face.
Right. It's an instance where the Guyver kick is set low, whereas like I feel like most of the time when Scott Adkins or whether it's him or a stunt double, whenever they're delivering it, it's usually a high kick.
Yeah. He snaps the Guyver kick, the literal kick, like moments right before he hits the ground. So it's just a little weird because I guess whenever he does that in films, he's usually doing that high in the air so that we, the audience, can kind of see it and take it in before his body starts to fall towards the ground.
Right.
It's just a shame that they decided to throw it at the end because then you just see his body smash on the ground like immediately afterwards. So it was hard for us to make that out. Right.
It's funny because like now that you mentioned it, I think this is the first movie where we have a Scott Adkins film. Scott Adkins in the movie. There are Guyver kicks, but I don't think there's ever a single moment where it's actually Scott Adkins doing Guyver kicks. It's like he does it, Kane Kosugi does it, but Scott Adkins never actually pulls it off himself.
That's true. He does a variation of it. We can kind of bring that up later with Tim Mann.
Yep.
But it's not it's not the signature Guyver kick.
Oh yeah, definitely not. I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense. You have a herniated disc. I don't know if you want to fall directly on your back.
Yeah. I don't blame him at all. I'm just kind of a little disappointed how they decided to set the kick up because famously it's kind of thrown higher in the air so that we have time to read it. It's very, very hard to read considering that he throws it right before he hits the ground in this scene.
Yep. But I do like this fight scene. It's a little it's basically like a ballroom brawl with better choreography, obviously, that elevates it. But yeah, like
I like this scene a lot actually. I like that he's taken on these four guys. It's not a one versus many, but
is it four? I feel like there's more, unless I'm miscounting.
I think it's at least 3 or 4, but I like it. Like he dispatches them in a way. It's like, hey, let me kick this guy off screen, and now these 2 other guys come at me with weapons or knives. Like it's always aware of where you're always sure of where the guys are, and because if they're not on screen, they were probably kicked away.
Right.
And I like that. It looks like he's really hitting these poor stunt guys, and he's like throwing the tables at him, or he's like kicking them through the tables. So the environmental work is really nice too.
Right. Yeah, that one dude who who actually gets Guyver kicked. Like when he grabs that stool, that tiny little stool, and he's like rushing at him with the stool overhead. And Scott Adkins does this very like this. I think this is ripped straight from a Jackie film, not in a bad way. Obviously, it's borrowed from a Jackie film where Scott Adkins like does a push kick like from the ground to the guy's legs, so the guy tumbles. He literally like falls to the ground, but like you in the next shot, you just see him like basically smash the stool onto the ground, and then he face plants. And I kept thinking like, man, what if he actually hit like his head bounced against that stool? Because it really close. Actually, I was thinking that was totally going to happen. And obviously, you don't want that to happen on set because that would be incredibly dangerous.
Well, as long as they plan for it, I think that's okay.
Right. Of course. I mean, they plan for everything. Yeah, I don't know. Like I don't know what to say. There's one great shot of Scott Adkins doing a side push kick, and then he uses that push to like almost as a ricochet so he could launch to do a round kick, all with the same leg. Does that make sense? I think that
yeah.
I think that makes sense. No, I like that. It's such a simple. It's probably not as easy as it looks, but like it's simple in its visuals, right? It looks very simple, but like it has a lot of flair to it as well. Okay, so ballroom, the bar fight ends with has this like really good like moment where Scott Adkins sets up. You can clearly tell it's Scott Adkins. He's setting up for the B twist. And then his stunt double comes in to actually do the twist, and then he turns that into a push side kick. I love that. I always love watching a B twist turn into something else, whether it's a shuriken twist or B twist rounds. But here it's a B twist side kick, and that he uses that to break a table that this one goon is rushing him with. And it's a great shot. That table's probably rigged to, be destroyed easily, but still awesome. I love it. Great way to end the fight. I mean, obviously Scott Adkins has to, go all macho and ask this one dude to smack him in the face a couple of times. So, it's almost like
it's inconsequential. It's fine.
Yeah, but that's how the fight scene ends. And I don't think we will have another fight until what? Maybe like 15 minutes later. It's not really a fight. It's more like he just beats up a bunch of people in like the back alleyway of a nightclub. And I think you and I were both disappointed with this.
Yeah. So what's happening now in the story is he has kind of been led to Myanmar. Is that
Myanmar? Yeah, Burma.
Myanmar, and so he's kind of going to shady places to try and see where to find leads to whoever killed his wife. And in order to do so, Scott Adkins goes to the trunk of a car with a drug dealer, and the drug dealer forces him to smoke crack or crystal meth.
I think it's meth, yeah.
And the reason why we were disappointed is we were hoping for maybe a drug-induced fight scene. And unfortunately, Scott Adkins still has really good hand-eye coordination under the influence of drugs. And he still beats up all these people very easily. Yeah. And I would have loved to see like a drugged out Scott Adkins just like throwing hits and just missing, or thinking he's fighting somebody and he's not really. Like they could have done so much with this, but it just turns into a straight up back alley fight.
Right. And again, these goons, they don't know how. Well, they're portrayed as if they don't know how to fight, right? So like Scott he doesn't even have to do any like crazy acrobatics for this. He just had, because he clearly is a better fighter. Everybody like he basically always keeps his distance against them, and they established a little bit early on that he was like fashioning himself these ninjutsu weapons. Like, so there was a moment where he brandishes these needles and he throws them during mid fight. But like, I don't know, like it just feels like, yeah, like you said, it would have been more fitting or even kind of funny to have him, almost like Drunken Master 2, this whole fight where he's like,
yeah, that's what I was hoping for. I was hoping for like a take on Drunken Master, like he's just bobbing and like waddling all over the place, trying to keep his balance because he's almost falling over because he's under the influence, while these guys are trying, just like wailing on him.
Right.
But it's just very by the numbers fight.
If they did that, I want them to change the title to Scott Adkins is the crackhead master. All right, so as quickly as we mentioned the fight, that's as much as that needs to be mentioned, talked about in it. Yeah, so there's a fight sequence that's very reminiscent of District B13. Almost the same exact setup, actually. So Scott Adkins is still drugged up.
I would say he's no longer drugged up.
He's sobering up.
He's sobered up.
No, but he's not sobered. Now. He's sobering, right? Like he.
Oh, is he?
I think that's what they're implying, because he's clearly, like, that's why he gets captured by the end of this, right? To imply that, like, he wasn't at his full potential. I think that's what the movie was trying to get at.
Oh, I mean, they had guns, so I'm just gonna say he can't jump and spinning kick everybody with a weapon. So sure. I'll give it to the bad guys at this time. Right.
Okay. Well, so the setup is almost like District B13, and if you've seen that film or heard us talk about it, the scenario is very similar, where Scott Adkins is in his apartment room, trying to escape, and he's trying to climb up or climb down. And there's no parkour in this movie, right? Unlike District B13. But it almost makes you think like it's gonna be David Bell, like just like hurtling over people, and because Scott Adkins is half naked in this too.
Yeah, I mean the setup is so similar. As soon as I saw this, I was like, oh, it's kind of like District 13. But there is this awesome shot that we both commented on when this kind of fight first happens. When so Scott Adkins disarms this guy with a handgun, and it's kind of funny. So he does some moves and he discards and he gets the gun, and he then tosses the gun and he hits a guy in the doorway with it.
Right.
And then it turns into him doing a double jump out of the frame of the door into one of these military guys standing out there, and the camera is just like trucking out with him as he's doing the double jump or the double kick, excuse me. And it's a really, really nice shot, very cinematic. And we both complained because instead of just sticking on that one shot, it cuts to a different angle so we could see him, doing the kick, in a different point of view. We were just like, oh no, don't cut. It looks so nice.
Yeah, just stick with the action, right? It was like, why like interrupt it for any reason? Unfortunately, the once Scott Adkins actually gets outside, and I was really hoping it was to turn into a parkour scene, because again, I actually thought this was taking homage from District 13, because it almost looked like Scott Adkins was about to jump rooftops.
Yeah, I mean, he's hopping over over the rails of the staircase. It feels like it feels extremely reminiscent of District 13 because he's also going through the apartments and the guys are chasing him. He's just not doing anything parkour. Yeah, right. I mean,
there are some moments where you can tell it's not Scott Adkins doing some of these things. Because obviously he's covering his face because it's not him. So I was thinking, well, if we had a parkourist or chasseur in this film, maybe we could have had an action scene here. It doesn't matter. I'm actually just being picky or beggy at this point, because there's so much action in this film. It doesn't even matter, because all in the grand scheme of things, you could basically see this as a non-fight scene, because there's just so much more better fights in this film.
Right. I mean, and it ends, as I mentioned, anticlimactically because he's trying to run away, and then he realizes, oh, they all have guns. Where else what can I do?
Well, they corner him with the guns. They capture him, torture him, and the only reason why he survives the torture is because of the many, many instances where he remembers he has a dead wife.
Wait, is that when he's getting tortured? Is that when they flash back to his wife with the fan blowing in her face?
That's totally not a fan. That's just flashback wind. And then he beats up the two captors. Oh, the two dudes who are holding him captive. It doesn't make any sense because he's in the wheelchair. He breaks out somehow, and then he disappears. And they look around the room where did he go? So they walk around the room, and then he's just standing there. It's how did you not see him? I know he's a ninja, but Do you think he was just like hiding behind the wheelchair? He's like, no, they can't see me.
Well, yes. So this movie is called Ninja Shadow of a Tear, and you would, I wouldn't blame you if you were not thinking, or if you were thinking like, why is he not doing anything ninja, or like, where are the ninja things going to come into play? And there's only a few moments where it's like, oh, he was hiding in the shadows, or oh, he set up a tripwire and that guy fell over, or he's making poison blow darts, not even blow darts. It's very, very, very loosely a ninja film, I would say, minus the costume he puts on.
Right, that's weird that you say that. Mostly because I know that they're trying to make this movie more of a ninja film than the first movie, right? Because the first movie, yes, it's also it's weird that I keep referencing it, and yet I find that first movie so forgettable. But this movie, they're trying to incorporate a little bit more the ninjutsu elements in there. They're using traditional ninjutsu weapons, and they're doing a little bit more acrobatics, a lot more I guess kind of the stealth. I guess that's the thing that they're trying to imply with that whole hiding in plain sight thing just now. But I'm like, you can't just disappear and then reappear. That's not how ninjas work.
I mean, he's using the camera frame to his advantage. That's not ninja. That is 80s slasher monster or killer.
Right. I actually don't remember the context too much of the next scene, the next action scene. It's not really a fight scene, right? So Scott Adkins now winds up in the forest where he tries to find. He tries to exhume a grave, right? But in order for him to get to the grave, he gets ambushed by a bunch of Burmese soldiers, or he basically takes them out one by one. This actually kind of sticks out like a sore thumb to me, just because it just
because of all the explosions and the gunplay.
Yeah, it's none of the other fight scene. Oh. Well, that's exactly it, right? The rest of the movie is all fight scenes, more traditional hand-to-hand combat, and here was it's almost like gunplay and whatnot. And I guess this is where I kind of backpedal on what I said before. It's all ninjutsu until Scott Adkins gets his hands on grenades. Once he gets in grenades, okay, well, it's no longer.
Well,
ninjutsu.
he throws a homemade ninja, white powder bomb at one point. Yep. So I guess that could be the argument, but other than that, yeah, there's nothing ninja about this. Right. It's gunplay, it's grenades, and maybe he's doing something. I don't know. He throws a shuriken maybe at one point.
Dude,
it's a stretch. Well, yeah. This whole thing is completely unnecessary if we're trying to keep in line with the ninja theme.
Well, he needs the grenade so we can kind of set up the next scene, which is necessary, obviously. And how he utilizes the grenades. But if you're gonna go that far, I don't know. I was just thinking the logical side of me was well, if you're gonna grab the grenades, why don't you grab the automatic weapons that these guys have?
Yeah. I mean, well, that would go against the ninja.
Oh, but grenades are perfectly fine.
Well, I was gonna say maybe the Ninja Manifesto was updated lately, and they voted and they decided to include grenades upon their ninja repertoire.
It was a firmware update. They're like, yeah, that's fine. The terms and services have been changed.
Yes, they phased out the shuriken in favor of grenades.
Right. Well, Scott Adkins now is at a warehouse, and this is the worst hideout for our quote unquote main villain of the movie. Supposedly the one who killed Namiko, which doesn't make any sense if in the context of the story in terms of where characters are placed. It's why would he be the one who killed her if he wasn't there, right? Because we're in Myanmar.
Yeah, right. It doesn't make any sense. You're just gonna have to go with it. Just don't think too deeply into it. When they explain the relationship of all the characters, because they will explain it to you to try to justify some things. Just ignore it because it'll just make you more confused.
Yeah, I was talking to you off mic, and I was like, man, I just read that plot synopsis 5 times, and I still don't understand how these characters are connected. Doesn't matter. Now we're in this warehouse.
Who cares?
We're in this hideout. where the villain, like this is the worst hideout in the world because the villain surrounded himself with inside like among barrels and barrels of flammable material.
Oh
like,
yes.
Why would you do that? Why?
So many red barrels all over the place.
Like what is? What does he? The villain literally works in a fireworks factory.
So I will say they used this opportunity for Scott Adkins to, incorporate more ninjutsu style stealth moves in the film, like because he's now in the ninja garbs, the ninja uniform, and he's sneaking around, taking out people very sneakily, very stealthily. Nothing to write home about, but it does remind you that yes, this is a ninja movie and he knows how to hide in the shadows, I guess.
Hides in the shadows while throwing grenades and exploding the place. There are so many explosions. Hey, I want to give the movie kudos because I actually think those are real. I think
the explosions. Oh yeah.
I mean, like
there are only a few places where I can see superimposed explosions on top of each other. But I think for a lot of the large grenade explosions that he's doing, I'm pretty sure those are all real.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, obviously, everything you said before is true. Like Scott Adkins is taking out all these guys in stealth. That's not what you're in this fight scene or this action scene for. You're in it for Scott Adkins versus the stunt coordinator or the fight coordinator for this film, Tim Mann. Tim Mann, who's a venerated stunt coordinator for like various films. But here, you can actually see like why Scott Adkins has these trademark moves throughout the film, like why he has these particular movements. It's because Tim Mann was the one behind the previs. Like when you watch the making of, you can Tim Mann's actually like telling Scott Adkins what to do, and like a lot of these triple kicks, I want to attribute to Tim Mann because like I'm sure Scott Adkins has done them in other movies, but like you can see like Tim Mann, like when he does them, like he does them with a lot of finesse. So he's probably directing Scott and he's like, okay, well, this is how you fucking do it. Do the triple kick because it makes everything look badass. And he's like, well, I don't know, like I can't do it like you, but sure, I'll do them anyways. But like, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the great things about this movie just in general is the fight choreography in addition to the cinematography. The camera really knows how to follow the choreography without being, shaky cam to hell. They don't over edit. They let moves just play out. And the nice thing with Tim Mann's fight choreography is there's always a nice exchange of blows. It's like, it's going from right to left because Tim Mann is taking the advance or the offensive and it's Scott defending, or then it's Scott trying to retaliate back and then the camera is just like following that all the time. So there's like a lot of it's very easy on the eyes, for lack of a better term, but it's nice that you can see everything. It's just shot so well, especially this one. I think knowing that Tim Mann was the fighter, like they made sure they wanted to capture everything clearly.
Right. And you know what? This is a great opportunity to actually hide the fact that Scott probably couldn't do a lot of this, because the dude is in full ninja garb, right? So like his face is covered up. It's not until like
that could be anybody.
Exactly. There probably was a Shaw behind the mask. It's not until later in the film where Tim Mann conveniently grabs the mask off of the Scott Adkins face or supposed Casey's face, and it's revealed to be Scott Adkins. I think that's so we clearly can tell that Scott Adkins is doing at least some of it, right?
Yeah, you know what? And just to compare it a little bit to the first movie, thank God Tim Mann also isn't in a ninja costume, because if you remember the first film, the final fight had Scott Adkins in a ninja costume versus the final bad guy, who's also in a ninja costume. And we were just like, who the hell is who is anybody? We just couldn't tell who the good guy was.
That is very, very true. Oh my God. Yeah. Well, it wouldn't make sense because this character that Tim Mann plays isn't a ninja. It's
yeah. I'm just saying though, like Tim Mann is wearing like a salmon shirt with like green camel pants, versus Scott Adkins in the ninja garb, it's very easy to tell who is who. Like I'm always thankful for wardrobe choices.
Thank goodness for color contrast. Okay, that's why I tell my clients at work all the time. Color contrast is super important. And it's great because like, well, let's talk about Tin Man's actual like choreography, like him as a performer, right? Because as a stunt, as an action director, or action coordinator for this film, he could just be the one who just screaming, barking orders behind the camera. But like to actually see him do it, it's you can see like the level of like martial skill that he has, right? So he does a lot of like kick blocking, like posing. He does this sequence of like consecutive push side kicks, and then without lowering his leg, he just turns that into an axe kick. It's like you can see the level of mobility, the level of flexibility that the guy has. And a lot of control. Like those are like the markers of a guy who like really knows how to throw kicks. And like he's a really good kicker. Like he's basically trading blows at a certain point of the fight where he's basically just delivering a bunch of kicks towards the Casey character. And he's just like basically nonstop. He just does them like over and over again, and he never really loses composure. Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to point out too is I don't think I've ever really seen this too often. Yeah, like they are exchanging blows with their legs, so they're kind of kicking at each other. And there's a lot of moments in this fight scene where they're using legs to block. If you think about it in a fight, usually you just use an arm to block. Like you use an arm to block a punch, or you even use an arm to block a kick. There's so many instances where like someone will throw a spinning hook kick, and then the other person will retaliate with a block with like a hook kick. And I was just really surprised to see that, because it doesn't seem so practical to do it that way, because you have to extend the energy to bring your leg up instead of just putting your arm out. It seems easier to block with the arm than the leg. But visually, it looks really cool. And it's interesting because a lot of times it seems like their legs are clipping. It's almost like one person was trying to throw a kick and the other person threw the kick maybe like a little moments later, and you see the legs cross or you see the legs clip. And I don't know if that was a choice by design or if that was like happy accidents, but it does happen enough. So I think that they probably planned it out that way. It looks really interesting. I can't recall that happening too often in any fights.
I don't know. I feel like it is definitely planned. I mean, there's no Bob Ross where there's no happy accidents here. I mean, it's amazing that they got the timing correctly, right? So I'm pretty sure this film doesn't use any sped up footage. So the actual speed that they're actually performing it in this movie is the actual speed that they're going at. So it's impressive that based on like what we're actually seeing from our current camera angle, they could time those counteracting spin hook kicks and make sure that like, yes, it looks like they're having impact, but they're not actually like smacking each other in midair, right? Because the accuracy that both actors need to have needs to be on point, because you might just hook shin, like it might be shin bone on shin bone, and you're just like but it looks like a lot of times the feet are really clipping together, so that's probably not as bad. But I love that that they did it. And Scott, I mean, like I said before, Tin Man, like he shows off like he's like the master of the triple kick, the flying triple kick. But like we obviously, like again, reiterating that Scott Adkins was injured for this film. He does deliver some like really great like he shows off a lot of like strength and power behind relatively simple martial arts techniques. So he does a jumping, spinning hook kick, but he turns that into a push kick, to which he delivers on Tin Man. All done in slow-mo, and then later does a tornado kick, and again turns that into a push kick. Great setup. I think for what it's worth, like sometimes Scott Adkins can't do like the more athletic stuff because of his injury. But that's why you work within the limitations of the actual performer, right? So here it's like, okay, well, let's keep him doing the basic stuff, but like still like emphasize like let's amp that up. Like let's emphasize like that, you know, like Scott's still a martial artist. Like he can show off all the power behind those moves. And I like that. Like, you know, like that actually was like as simple as it is, you know, like, cause like I feel like anyone can technically do that, like, and with enough practice. Like Scott like really like has mastered the basics and like can actually show that off cinematically. Yeah, and then you know, like I don't know, there's this, you know, like Scott still does like the more stylistic stuff, right? So he does a B twist to drop kick, which it doesn't even like phase Tim Man, you know, like because Tim Man's on the floor, right? Like he.
Yeah, it reminded me of Tony Jaa doing that in Ong Bak, except I'm pretty sure Tony Jaa had more rotations than Scott in his film. But yeah, it looks like his thigh almost hits him in the body more so than his leg.
I'm guessing he probably did that so he doesn't actually hurt Tim Man. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm not really complaining so much because it's funny because when he does the move, the camera is kind of low to the ground, and it could have easily been just Scott Adkins doing it, and they could have cut to the leg hitting him, but we see it all in the one shot. So I want to say kudos to the cameraman because it almost threw me off. I didn't think he was going to be able to capture him being airborne for so long and then finally delivering that hit.
Well, it's a great shot because like again. It's actually Scott doing it. I like that. I like that shot a lot. Although the previous cuts before that are a little awkward because you see a moment where the camera like zooms in on Tim as he's rolling away from the camera, and before that is like it zooms out like in towards Scott as he's approaching. He's about to set up for the twist, and I was like, oh well, I kind of just wish we actually saw that Scott like was winding up for the twist and then delivered it all in one continuous take rather than cutting up in between.
Yeah, we didn't need to get the roll away.
Yeah,
from
especially since he got hit.
I don't know. Yeah, exactly. I guess maybe for the pacing of the fight, maybe they just needed a few more beats in there instead of Scott just going into that kick. So I was okay with it, but I think I agree with you where that wasn't really necessary. Right. I think for me, I'm not too crazy about how this fight ends. Like it ends on that big move, that kick on the ground, but then it goes into him just kind of grabbing the knife and then, just impaling him in the chest. I don't know. I kind of wanted something more, but I don't know what, if that makes sense.
I think it's fine. Like at that point, they basically showed off that Tim Man's character is like winded and he can't really fight him anymore. So it just had to be a simple ending, I think. We'll get back around when it comes to like anticlimactic end fights, like ending to fights, because that's something that I'll bring up later in the film. Well, this isn't the end of this action sequence. So now Tim Man's dead, and now Scott Adkins takes on the head honcho, played by Shun Sugata, a Japanese actor. I don't think he actually has any martial arts background, as far as I can tell. Yeah, so this fight sequence had to obviously work within the limitations of what the actor can do. So the actor is obviously older. He's like probably 50s, 60s, and he's brandishing the trademark weapon that was basically used to kill Scott Adkins' wife, and he's just swinging it relatively easily. Like simple movements.
Do you know the name of that weapon?
They mentioned Manriki. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly.
So just think of it as a rope, but there are, I guess, like barbs on certain ends. So, you can use that to rip or tear after wrapping it around someone's neck, which is what happens a lot in this movie.
Oh, you know what? I might take something back when I said before, where it's like, it doesn't make sense for Tim Man to be a ninja. Technically, this Goro character, played by Shun Sugata, is technically a ninja.
Yep. Technically he is.
He's not in a ninja garb. That's all we have to be grateful for. That's not a ninja versus ninja fight again.
Yes. I think they learned their lesson from the first movie. Don't have ninja on ninja in shadowy areas without Scott Adkins removing his mouthpiece or whatever, because you don't know who the hell is fighting him. But I will say, this fight is pretty short, But there does seem to be a few moments where the Japanese actor, I'm pretty sure he's doing some bouts of choreography. And as you mentioned, he is an older gentleman. So there are, there's a few moments where you can see him. I'm pretty sure that's really him swinging the katana around.
But again,
fighting
simple.
against Scott. Yeah, very, very simple. They make him look good. He's older, so I'm glad they didn't go I'm an old man. Let's cut to a wide with my back to the camera, and now I'm going to start jumping.
Yes,
all
that
over
is
the
also
place.
a callback to the first movie.
Exactly, yeah. Like they keep this fight grounded because what happens is he starts using that serrated kind of whip weapon to then wrap it around Scott's neck and then try to choke him out with it. So it's not too long. I'm glad that it does stay a little grounded, considering he is the older fighter.
Again, you said it before. This fight is relatively short, so there is a moment where he has upper hand. He has the barbed wire around Scott's neck, but thankfully Scott has a sword protecting his neck from obviously killing him. So Scott just wins by pure luck, I think.
No,
he flips him, but
over his back.
he's fortunate that he had the sword there.
Well, he had the sword the whole.
No, I mean he had
so.
he's fortunate that he had a high guard with the sword. If he put the sword down any lower, it would just wrap around his neck and he would have been fucked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter.
Of course. But, Scott Adkins is our protagonist. He's got to win.
And he does.
And, what's kind of funny, when I first watched this, which was a long, long, long time ago. I think I first watched this when it first came out. He defeats this guy, and they set up this guy to be the main villain. And after this fight, I was pretty disappointed because I was like, oh, that was so short. The Tim Man fight was nice and long. Usually with the last bad guy, you want it to be the best fight. And so after that, it felt like the movie was coming to a close. And after that fight, I was like, oh, that's it. I was like, oh, okay.
Well,
sure.
I mean, yeah, it looks like he bested the final boss. Actually, there's a great shot of how he actually defeats the final boss. It's great because he cuts off the dude's head in a very stylized, in a stylized way where, the villain is facing away from the camera. Scott Adkins obscures the body. This is all in one shot, by the way. He obscures the body as he cuts the guy's head off, and you can see the head rolling away. It's obviously better in a visual than just hearing me talk about it. It's really great. I love the execution of it until they zoom in on it and it becomes a static image of Scott Adkins. Why did they do that?
Yeah, I think they didn't get the coverage of holding him long enough because, as you mentioned, they have to do a digital zoom into a still frame of Scott Adkins just in that pose, which is a little disappointing. It would have been nice if the camera just kept on, manually zooming in and not somebody in post having to do that for
it's
us.
very unfortunate. Not to belittle the coolness factor of it, but it kind of does because you can see the fire in the background stops moving.
Yeah, I mean everything stops moving. Even if you're not familiar with post-production work, somebody pressed pause on your DVD
and zoomed in, just zoom in a little bit.
Exactly.
Let's NCIS this. So you're right. The final boss is not Goro. Scott has been taken for a ride for the whole movie.
So spoiler alerts for anybody who doesn't want to know who the real villain is, because it's I don't know. I feel like it's not so obvious.
Okay. Well, if you are
you
are a martial arts snob, historian, or if you've just seen a lot of martial arts movies, you may or may not know who Kane Kosugi is. Kane Kosugi is son of Sho Kosugi, who I think they totally got him for this role because of the fact that he is Kane Kosugi. His father, Sho Kosugi, was the poster child of American ninja films back in the 80s, right? 90s, early 90s. Yeah. He starred in Enter the Ninja and Revenge of the Ninja and a whole bunch of other ninja films. And Kane actually starred in his first role ever when he was like 6 years old in Revenge of the Ninja. And so like Kane Kosugi, his whole entire life has been built around like martial arts, and you know he has like this shadow casted on him that he's kind of like risen up to kind of like take up the mantle of like being in ninja films. So it's like, oh, it's very fitting for him to be in this movie. So again, if you have any sort of knowledge of any of this stuff, you'll know that like Kane Kosugi's in the movie and he hasn't had a fight scene yet. So
well, he had like a little scuffle with a student, in a sparring match. Yeah, but if you're familiar with anything, any sort of plot devices, like you're like, hey, where'd that Kane guy go? I haven't seen him in a while. Isn't he a martial artist? So
right,
yeah. So spoiler alert, he is our real big bad guy.
Well, so production standpoint, I think they only had Kane Kosugi for a couple of days to film all his action scenes. And I think in general, he wasn't actually on set for very long. They just had him come in to do his dialogue scenes for like a day. And then later, like, all right, film all the action scenes. Yeah. And that was it. And I think that's why you were saying like in his episode with Scott Adkins, it almost sounds like Kane doesn't remember a lot of it because he wasn't really there for very long.
Yeah, it's a shame. I really would have liked to hear more input from him about some of the fight stuff. It almost feels like when when Scott Adkins was showing him the footage, it was almost like he was just trying to remember things because it was so long ago, but he couldn't really have words. But yeah, as you mentioned, they filmed this fight very fast. And considering that this is the last fight and one of the more, this is probably the most technically difficult one. I think they said it took like 3 days to film.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, let's actually talk about the choreography itself. I think that this is pretty good, but there's something about it that is a little off to me, and it's not at all negative. It's not like I like this fight a lot. There's something about the speed. It's a little too fast. Do you get that sense?
Really?
Sometimes it's actually so fast I can't keep up with it.
I'll go into it maybe a little later, but there is one move that while we were watching this, it happened so fast that I was like, what happened? I was like, he did something. I know Kane Kosugi did something because that was so fast I couldn't tell what it was, and it looked really cool, and we had to go back and rewatch it, and I was like, oh man, that's so crazy what he does.
What moment are you thinking of? Because I'm actually thinking of the moment where Kane Kosugi, he does, after a trade of like pretty elaborate choreography behind the shoulder, obviously it's Kane, right? So he does a spinning hook kick, and he turns that into a 540 kick, but his 540 is so fast. It is so fast. Like I actually didn't register as a 540. Because he I mean, it's fine, like that's a stylistic or preference thing, right? Like you can have a very floaty acrobatic or like floaty style 540 kick, or it can have a really quick one. His is more quick. It's so quick that I actually couldn't register it. Like it also looks like just a regular tornado kick. So I was actually thinking to myself, like, it could have just been a tornado kick, honestly. He didn't even have to do something so elaborate, and it would have probably registered all the same. Because, Scott Adkins, as the performer that he is, he's selling that he got hit. So, like, he doesn't have to do something that elaborate, was what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah, so the moment I'm referring to is, so Scott Adkins has his arm around his neck, and so he starts to pull him towards the ground, Kane Kosugi, and I don't know what he does exactly. He kind of rolls out of it, causing... it's almost like Scott Adkins was putting him in a throw, and he negated it mid-throw, and thus transferring his energy into Scott, forcing him to like roll out of this throw. It sounds like a weird explanation because it happens so freaking fast. When we were watching it, I was like, what was that? Like I knew to make a mental note that I really wanted to see that moment again, because similar to what you were saying with the kick, he's fast, and him doing this move was just it was like too quick for my eyes, but I kind of like that.
And that's fine. Like I like see behind the camera and whatnot, like I know that these performers are incredibly talented. I have no doubt of that. It's just, you know, like we have to work within the limitations of what the camera can capture and what the human eye can capture. You know, because again, this is a movie. So, you know, sometimes, you know, because they are shooting some of this, or they're shooting with, you know, a dedicated camera to capture action. So those are nice moments to actually slow down, you know, like, because, you know, maybe have some test screenings be like, or test plays where you realize, like, okay, well, that was too quick. I couldn't register what that was. Let's slow it down so the audience can actually register it. But yeah, like, but Kane is a great kicker, you know? I think he even said it in his episode where, you know, he's talking about his background as, you know, like a very varied background in martial arts, but he was mostly skilled in taekwondo, like karate and taekwondo. So he's just it's great with the kicking stuff. And, you know, he obviously has a lot of speed and like accuracy with a lot of these movements. And yeah, I don't know. He was kind of downplaying his own like punching ability, but I don't know. I actually don't think he's as bad as he thinks he is. You know, I think he's pretty fine with his hands, although that sounds really weird.
I think one of the things I like too about this fight is Kane Kosugi is playing up the like the senpai role a lot, in that he is really showing that he is the more skilled fighter. I like that after a lot of moves, he will get up very quickly, very, very fast, and he'll get in this really, really like stoic, just tight pose, implying like, okay, yes, we were fighting, but I'm still the better fighter, so I'm like showing more, I don't know, like command of what I can do. Like he'll get up really quickly, he'll look really stiff, but not in like a bad way. It's more so like he's just showing how fast he is and how true to form he's being with his style.
Interesting that you thought of it that way, because there's a moment when after Scott does a, you know, flying, like he does a spin kick off of the wall. So there, after that, there's a trailer sequences where Scott is basically like hitting him from all different angles, and you know, like they look impactful, but Kane's kind of just like taking them, and it doesn't, you know, like it, like yeah, he looks like it actually like got delivered, but like he just immediately retaliates as if like it did nothing to him. And I actually I think that's a little bit of a disconnect there. I'm like, oh, I kind of want him to like stagger a little bit, you know?
You mean
I want Kane to stagger a little bit, like.
Okay.
I don't care how skilled you are.
I see
like
what
that's
you mean.
like it. That was a jumping kick to the face. Like how are you standing that?
Right. So I completely get that. I'm a little okay with that, because I think what they need to do is they need to sell that he is unfazed by Scott's moves, right? They probably should have made a choice to not throw that kind of powerful kick and make it land. I think it should have been that Kane probably should have just been blocking all these blows and not absorbing so many hits.
Sorry,
then
go ahead.
Then maybe that could deflate.
I think what sells if a person is more skilled as a martial artist isn't the ability to take hits, but rather like avoid hits, right? So blocking, evading, parrying. He does parry, like he does all these things, but like those moments where he's actually absorbing hits, I think that's really awkward. That doesn't sell to me from a visual standpoint that that's a skilled martial artist. That sells to me as like there's a disconnect from the choreography to me as the viewer. It's like why is he Scott Adkins does a front push kick towards Kane's chest, and Kane immediately retaliates with the jumping back kick. Like how did he not get pushed backwards, or like he not suffer some sort of like, I don't know, something?
Right. I mean, it's like someone who gets shot in the movie, but they're still able to stand up. You're like, listen, that blow is really not is gonna take it out of you. So like maybe, yeah, you're right. Maybe he should have stumbled a little more, shown more pain, but the choreography just keeps going. So there's not really any time for him to react to it.
I mean, I love how that stuff like doesn't phase Kane Kosugi, but what will phase him is when Scott Adkins grabs his leg, and then he just like slowly hurls him towards this vase, like this glass cabinet that just happens to be there. It looks kind of awkward. Yeah.
Oh, I hate that moment. It's so weird. Yeah, so he kind of throws him into this cabinet that has like a glass panel on it, and he awkwardly, it looks like he intentionally smashes his head through it, as opposed to looking like he got thrown into it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that was the best take, but you know, if they only had him for a few days and they didn't get it.
True. Well, I mean, they cut for a reason. You know, like once they do the cut, if you only watch that one cut, you can clearly tell Kane was like deliberately trying to hit his head against the glass.
Yeah, that's the problem. It looks like he was forcibly trying to break that glass. But I kind of like how this section ends. Yeah. It's with Scott Adkins doing a jumping.
It is a pro wrestling move. It's a drop kick.
Yes, yeah, jumping double drop kick, side kick, whatever. But then he throws an additional side kick in there, thus kicking Kane Kosugi through the wall. I was not expecting that when I first saw it, and into the next room and into our final portion.
Well, I mean, I think I pointed out before when we were watching it that it was very reminiscent of Enter the Dragon, right? And after listening to them talk about it, it was like, yes, that was totally what they're going for. Yeah.
That's what they were doing. Yep.
But, you know, like two standouts before we actually go into the weapons fight, which is what happens in the next room. I like that, you know, obviously Kane, well, three things, I guess. Kane Kosugi does the Guyver kick. That was the other person that we're mentioning that was doing the Guyver kick. So there are moments where Scott was like a little harsh on himself, you know, like in terms of like how he, you know, he had to perform some of the choreography. So there's a moment where he delivers an axe kick towards Kane Kosugi's shoulder, but I didn't capture this, and this is what our fucking show's about, but I couldn't even see it because the action's so fast. Scott was complaining that like he had to actually use his hands to grab onto his leg when he was delivering that axe kick because he was afraid the actual axe kick was going to hurt Kane.
Oh yeah,
I was like, oh wow,
him saying that. After rewatching it, you can clearly see he's like holding his thighs to, you know, kind of
like that's a good like standout moment because I was like, oh yeah, I didn't even notice that. Like, and I've seen this movie like 2 or 3 times now, or this fight scene multiple times, and I still didn't notice it until he actually said it. I was like, oh, okay, that's very good. You know, like I definitely didn't capture that before, but now that you said it, it's like, oh, okay. But it's fine. I understand why he did that because, you know, maybe it's, you know, he would have actually like broken his collarbone or something like that. And then there's a moment where Kane, like before when he like lifts his leg up to deliver the kick, and Scott like punches him, and there's like a small delay where he punches him. And nothing happens, and then he grabs the leg. You know, so it's like a slowdown, and Kane has to sell the impact of the punch so that it can explain why it takes so long for Scott Adkins to grab the leg. And I was like, oh, that's actually a really good point too. Like I didn't even notice that, but because the whole fight is so fast, like even moments like that, like I wouldn't even have paid attention to because like sometimes we need the speed to go down a little bit. But anyways, yes, so we got pushed into the next fight scene, literally by Scott Adkins. We are in the weapons room where Kane busts out the katana versus Scott Adkins' bow staff. And they obviously switch up the weapons here. And I think that Kane was actually complaining about using this weapon because it was made out of wood and it would constantly break.
That's kind of interesting. Yeah, it looks pretty legit in the wide shots and the faraway shots. I'm sure they just have like a sheen tape over it. But I wish we could have seen some behind the scenes where they were fighting with it and this, you know, the thing just explodes or just breaks in half. I think that would have been really fun.
Maybe it's in that DVD version
because it's technically 2 wooded weapons. You know, because he's not really fighting with real metal. It's because Scott is using the wooden bow staff, so it would have been nice to see how that really.
It's only fitting that we have the final fight be with weapons because it is a ninja movie. I mean, like, yes, we have Scott Adkins, we have Kane Kosugi, but it is a ninja film. It makes more sense to actually have like a sword fight. So this is actually how we end the movie. It's fine. I liked it better when there were fisticuffs. It was just hand-to-hand combat. It was like the choreography was more interesting in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I like So I've been looking for some good katana swordplay, and I haven't really been able to find something I liked. I did like a lot of the choreography here, but I think I wasn't crazy about some of the logistics of this fight. So Scott has the bow staff against the metal katana, and Kane Kosugi swipes the bow staff in half, thus turning it into kind of like two kali sticks. And Scott then gets the upper hand, and he kind of semi defeats Kane Kosugi. Triple
that's
kicking
a great,
him over.
great move. Yeah.
Triple kicking him over some stuff in the room. But then, as I mentioned in prior episodes, he discards the two weapons, which he was already kind of winning with, to exchange it for the katana. Like, I get it, the katana's metal, but I feel that, like, logistically, if you're already winning with your current weapons, why change it to something else? Like, that's a weird nitpick. But when I keep on watching the scene, I was like, don't drop the thing that you're already winning with. Like, you don't know if you're gonna.
The counter argument to that is that Kane switches up his own style, right? So like he keeps his katana, but he takes out Owashi, and now he has two weapons, and he combines the two into like a Darth Maul, like double-sided weapon. And he changes back and forth between the two. So it feels like both of these characters are in flux in terms of like how they want to actually play out this fight. And I'm fine with that. I'm completely okay with it. But I don't know. My only real gripe with this is that it's actually really short. Like this segment of it.
you wanted something longer?
You know what? I mean, I think Scott Adkins is so well known for his kicks and his acrobatics that like the sword play, he's not really known for it, and he has said it himself. Like he doesn't do so much of the weapon stuff, even though he says it's easier. But that's because like the choreography's simple. Like it's way simpler.
Right. Well, it's weird because like I like all the stuff he's doing with the swordplay here, and I think what's disappointing, I'll agree with you. I think it's too short. Once Kane Kosugi kind of combines the two katanas together into like the longer like bladed bow staff, it doesn't go on very long. I'm always interested in seeing dual wielding katanas because he does kind of separate it again later in the fight. I wanted more of that, but then it just kind of turns into Scott, swiping at his belly. He, King Kasugi's injured, so he throws the katana into Scott's shoulder, and then it just, that's when the fight's gonna turn into the struggle moment. That happens. That happens a lot in like last fights. It's no longer about choreography. It's just like both people are injured and they're doing whatever they can to,
It's like once it becomes like two injured people fighting, like choreography is almost out the window. There's a moment where Kane like
exactly
he smacks Scott in the face with the hilt of the blade of the sword. I mean, not the blade. And Scott is staggering. He's like falling backwards, and then Kane, for no reason, does a side kick towards one of those standing with the panels, I guess. He pushes that over for no reason. Like, why did he do that?
I mean, I think they were trying to imply that he was trying to
but
kick Scott.
No, because Scott is like completely far. No, that doesn't make any sense because Scott is like falling backwards, and then Kane completely like kicks like 90 degrees away from him.
Yeah, so I can clearly see it here. Scott it should have been Scott like fell backwards to dodge the kick.
Maybe, yeah.
But the thing is, it looks like Kane is just kicking this panel, not trying to kick Scott. So there's a huge visual disconnect there. The camera does cut, and the panel, falls towards us to kind of alleviate this disconnect. But as we're watching it does look a little.
I mean, I don't know, this is not the best way to end the fight. But this doesn't detract from the previous fight. Like the fight, all in all, like the fight is pretty good. But the way that this fight scene ends is pretty anticlimactic, and I think I don't know if you share the same sentiment as me. I'm pretty sure you do. But I don't think we're alone in this. Even Scott Adkins has said it. He's like, it's a little bit anticlimactic. That like it just ends the way it does. Should we even talk about it? I mean, we ever come this far, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've already kind of said
true.
spoilers, so yeah. So basically, what happens is Scott Adkins finds the weapon, this
Barbed
kind of
wire.
barbed wire, serrated rope that was used to kill his wife. And before Kane can deliver the final overhead swiping, katana sword hit, whatever, he swings the rope around his neck, thus choking him out with it. And they intercut it with scenes of his wife.
Very
getting
inappropriate.
killed.
That's not the emotion you want for this fight. this.
Right. I think they were trying to go for something cathartic. They were doing the parallels between how his wife was killed, so it's supposed to be alleviating for him as a protagonist to get his revenge, but it seems kind of in bad taste.
They could have done it better. They didn't. They did not do it better.
I don't think we needed to cut to his wife getting killed. I think the audience got it. He's now using the weapon that was used to murder his wife to kill the murderer.
Yeah, that's unfortunately how that fight ends. We get a little bit more closure, like how to wrap up the movie and whatnot. The final shot of Scott, we're in spoiler territory. The final shot of Scott getting rid of the pendant that was belonging to his wife. It's like very bittersweet. More just bitter. It's not really like the most satisfying ending. Because
it's fine. It's your epilogue. I was okay with it. It all kind of comes back around. Maybe it's just we see the reflection of the wife in the water. Maybe that's what kind of makes it a little cheesy.
Right. Yeah, I was like, what is happening? We were thinking that she came back alive.
Like her dead body's floating in the water, but it's just like CG of her in the water reflection. It's fine. This is a $2.6 million movie. I'm very, very forgiving with that kind of stuff.
Maybe he's there to. Maybe in the next movie he'll try to find the person who ADR'd her and try to bring her back to life somehow. So that's a Ninja Shadow of a Tear. I have no idea why that's called Shadow of a Tear. Even if Shadow of a Tear was interplayed into the story somehow, it would make any sense because that doesn't make any sense.
Well,
what the hell's a Shadow of a Tear?
Ninjas hide in the
shadows.
And
they cry a lot.
And they cry a lot. Yep.
All right. So I don't like the movie, but I like the action, and that's my summary for this. It's definitely a step up from the first one because the first one is so forgettable. I think there's one good fight scene from the first movie that's like still sticks with me. But then again, that episode was like a year and a half ago, so maybe I don't remember it so much because of that reason. But I will say, like, the action in this movie is significantly better. And that's, like, the main reason why you're actually drawn into this movie, right? Because the story in either film is not spectacular. They're not main draws. Scott has said that this is probably the hardest film that he's ever had to do. I don't know if that's because he was injured or the level of athleticism involved in it. Personally, I don't think that this is his best movie. I definitely prefer all the Undisputed movies that he was in, like, way more than this, because I actually like them as movies. Here, I don't actually like the movie in a weird way. I can understand if you are you want to find a good ninja film, why you might be able to appreciate this, because it feels like it's a good attempt to show off like what ninjas are capable of cinematically. I think Rossatron actually mentioned this in a great video essay talking about like how ninjas are not respected in terms of like how they're cinematically portrayed. Like all the ninja movies of the 80s and 90s, like the one that Sho Kosugi was in, like they did more harm than good for the image of ninjas, even though they popularized ninjas. Here it's like it's a good middle ground. It's like they take ninjas seriously, but the story itself I'm not a fan of. So that's where I'm gonna go against that mentality, or that statement. But it's a good. It has good action in it, and that's like the main takeaway I'll have for this film. I don't like the story, so I don't actually recommend watching the whole film. I say just watch the fight scenes, and you're fine. And that's my takeaway. I have a feeling, Zero, that you are in complete disagreement with me.
Oh yeah, of course. So man, there is so much action in this movie that you can just watch the movie. This is so surprising. This is one of those things where we have like a movie with maybe 3 to 4 to 5 fights in it, and we kind of have to fill in the blank with plot. In this film, there's lots of little moments in between, so that once the plot starts to get maybe a little boring, you're like, okay, well now here's some action, and then as somebody who's looking for that kind of stuff, you're satisfied for a little bit, then you get the lull of more character stuff and more plot, and then they give you action. And it's so easy to just sit through this movie and just wait for all the action to happen. I was perfectly fine with it. I do agree with you in that I don't really care for the movie as a whole. But I think if you're gonna watch the action, you can sit through the plot. It's perfectly serviceable.
Okay, interesting. It's weird that we both agree, and yet we don't agree with our consensus. Yeah, it's the weirdest thing.
Yeah. Like I know as a whole, this isn't isn't Shakespeare. It's not doing anything new. It's not doing anything I would personally like. Like, the action is what saves this movie from being watchable. Like, if Scott Adkins wasn't in it, if Tim Mann didn't choreograph it, if Isaac Florentine wasn't directing it, I think this story could have been one of those really cheesy 80s movies that people made fun of. But I think the fact that you have these three key players that are helping to elevate it above mediocrity is what is like giving me that push to suggest to watch it.
I guess a part of me will only suggest it because like numbers show, right? Like the numbers will dictate whether or not like a movie like this will get any further support in the future, right? Because if you think about it, this is probably the last R-rated adult-oriented, not adult as in adult video, but like adult again oriented film about ninjas. Like, what do we have now? We have Ninja Turtles, we have Ninjago, we have all those fucking like ninjas are considered a joke, right? So like if you want something of this caliber, I say watch it just to check it out. But actually, personally, I don't think the movie's worth sitting through. You could save yourself like 30 minutes just by watching those fight scenes alone without all that plot and that pesky plot in the way. Because the plot, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Like, it's a revenge story, and everything in between is just a mess. But I will only say and agree with you on that note to watch the film just to support movies like this, because I do want to see more ninja films of this caliber for adults.
Yeah.
So that's Ninja 2. I can't believe I'll say this. I think the story from Ninja Assassin's better than this. The story.
Oh my God.
Not the everything
okay.
else. Not the everything else.
Do you remember the first movie at all, Ninja 1? So I re-listened to our podcast episode, and we were all in agreement that we did not.
Definitely not.
But you know what though? I remember saying this in the podcast that I was saying that that movie was kind of a good time to watch because you and I watched it together and we were drinking, and there were a lot of moments that were not supposed to be funny, but we were definitely laughing at it. I think the issue with this film, the sequel, is that it takes itself very seriously. There are no moments where it's like something so bad it's good is happening, where there's unintentional comedy. It's just played extremely straight. It's just a revenge movie. We couldn't even really poke fun of it. We were just kind of like, okay, well, when's the action going to happen? Okay, that's good action. I can appreciate that. Like,
Yeah.
So
well, I mean, the action's fine, so that's like the action's more than fine, so that's enough reason to like appreciate this film. Hey, you know what this movie needed to actually like lighten up the tone is if we had a methed up Scott Adkins beating people up in the middle of the film. That would have been perfect.
That would, you know, would have been even better if when his wife Namiko gets killed, if they gave her a little fight scene and she had the crutch that she took from the first movie and she was trying to defend herself with it.
Oh man. Yeah, that's Ninja Assassin. No, not Ninja Assassin. Ninja 2. Ninja 2.
Ninja 2.
Have we done any ninja films where we're like wowed by? Like, I guess this is the closest we've ever been wowed by a ninja movie.
Yeah, I would say this is the closest to probably the best ninja movie.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people agree with that. You know, this is probably the best ninja film like ever made.
In terms of not being a so bad it's good, like just legitimately, okay, like this is when you can take seriously.
So so with that high marker, that high bar about like ninja films, now we're never gonna ever top this episode. Here's a mini review of the Sho Kosugi ninja trilogy. They're all fucking terrible, but watch them because they're fucking funny. There you go. Now we can watch a movie that is so bad it's good.